Shalom, shalom, shalom. This is the Akazaki Yahoo, and I start off this broadcast as I start every broadcast by giving all praise, honor, and great esteem to the Most High Power, Yahuwah, Bahashem, Yahushua, Hamashiach, and to the 12 tribes of Israel who are scattered to the four quarters of the earth. I say Shalom wa Baruchim, that is peace and blessings. And I cannot wait for the day that the Most High brings us all together once again. And we are 12 tribes, one family, one nation, under the Most High, yet once again, under one covenant. Uh, this particular video, I am going to do a bit of a breakdown of the Willie Lynch letter. Now, this is an important part of history, largely because of the effects that it still has to this day. Now, it has been argued by many that the Willie Lynch letter could have been a quote-unquote hoax, when in fact it is not. It is definitely not a hoax. It is definitely a existing, living stigma that still is completely functional to this day. Now, a large topic of conversation will be the time frame that exists from the 1930s into the 1960s, where the so-called Negro household was well and ordered and things were completely situated. Well, during that time frame, there was a situation which came to be the government interceding into the black household. And the option was given for the so-called Negro class or Negro race for the woman to either accept government help or to keep the family together. The so-called Negro woman chose government help. And that has gotten us to where we are to this day. So let's get into the letter. Here's a PDF I left in the description box for your use. The Willie Lynch letter, The Making of a Slave. There are a few introductions here. We're going to skip past the introduction portions of it here. And that's going to land us on page 12. William Lynch, The Untold Story, 1712. So this is a speech delivered by a white slave owner, William Lynch, on the bank of James River in 1917. And the message is still true today by Willie Lynch. He says, "Gentlemen, I greet you here in the bank of the James River in the year of our masters, 1712. First, I shall thank you, the gentlemen of the colonies of Virginia, for bringing me here, and I am here to help you solve some of your problems with slaves." Mind you, for those of you who do not know, the slaves that he's speaking of are the so-called Negroes who are in America at that time. You, so-called Negroes today, are the descendants of these very people that he's speaking of. Let's continue. Your invitation reached me on my modest plantation in the West Indies. The West Indies, that is an area of islands along the area of Jamaica and in that realm, the West Indies. That's where he was from. He had slaves, so-called slaves, in that area. So the West Indies, where I have experimented with some of the newest and still oldest methods of control of slaves. Ancient Rome would envy us if my program is implemented. So what he's saying here is that he has a formula that he has been testing and it has shown to work. So much so that the Romans, who also had slaves, they would be envied of this point in time if they implement what he has for them. Let's continue here. As our boat sailed south on the James River into our Illusion King, named from our illustrious king, whose vision of the Bible we cherish. Whose version, Salika, whose version of the Bible we cherish. I saw enough to know your problem is not unique. While Rome used cords and woods as crosses to stand human bodies along its old highway in great number, you are here using the tree and rope on occasion. So he's saying here that in Rome, they used crosses and they put people on crosses and hung them along the roads so that people could know this is your fate. Well, in America, they use trees and they hung ropes from those trees and they hung slaves. That was their almost their calling card to an extent. And even to this day, the white supremacists will flash a rope or show a rope to show that you Negroes can still get hung, as if we should be afraid of such behavior. Let's continue. He says, I caught the whiff of a dead slave hanging from a tree a couple of miles back. You are not only losing valuable stock by hanging, you are having uprising. Slaves are running away. Your crops are sometimes left in the field too long for maximum profit. You suffer occasional fires. Your animals are killed. Gentlemen, you know what problems are. I do not need to elaborate. I am not here to enumerate your problems. However, I am here to introduce you to a method of solving them. So he's telling them that what they're doing is wasting their money and that he has a better way that can maximize their profits by making their slaves to function as they need to. I'm shaking here because this is infuriating. These are my ancestors that he's talking about. Not my ancestors, the slave masters, my ancestors, the slaves. So let's continue here. Mind you, it's 2 o'clock in the morning on the Eastern time zone. That's where I am in Indiana. Let's continue. In my bag here, I have a foolproof method of controlling your black slaves. I am guarantee, I guarantee every one of you that if it is installed correctly, it will control your slaves for at least 300 years. My method is simple. Any member of your family or your overseers can use it. I have outlined a number of differences among the slaves, and I take these differences to make them bigger. I use fear, distrust, and envy for control purposes. These methods have worked on my modest plantation in the West Indies, and it will work through the South. Take some simple, take this simple little list of differences and think about them. On the top of the list is age, but it is there only because it starts with an A. The second is color or shade. It is intelligence, size, sex. Size plantation, status on plantation, attitude of owner, whether the hair is fine, coarse hair, or is tall or short. Now that you have a list of differences, I shall give you an outline action. But before I shall assure you, but before that, I shall assure you that distrust is stronger than trust, and envy is stronger than adulation, respect, or admiration. The black slave, after receiving this indoctrination, shall carry on and will become self-fueling and self-generation for hundreds of years, maybe thousands. I feel like I'm about to throw up. I've read some of this before. I hadn't read way up here. This is freaking insane. This and I look at the state of my people, and I understand the curses in Devarim and Deuteronomy, and in Leviticus, Deuteronomy 28, Leviticus 26. And I read this crap, and it literally makes me feel sick to my stomach, because this is what my people have lived day in and day out for the last, few hundred years. And it's almost worse today than it was then. Let's continue. I don't think I can read this. I'm gonna let Google do it.
West Indies. Don't forget, you must pitch the old black male versus the young black male and the young black male against the old black male. You must use the dark-skinned slaves versus the light-skinned slaves and the light-skinned slaves versus the dark-skinned slaves. You must use the female versus the male and the male versus the female. You must also have your white servants and overseers distrust all blacks, but it is necessary your slaves trust and depend on us. They must love, respect, and trust only us. Gentlemen, these kits are the keys to control. Use them. Have your wives and children use them. Never miss an opportunity. If used intensively for 1 year, the slaves themselves will remain perpetually distrustful. Thank you, gentlemen.
So he's implementing what you would call a grand scheme, and this particular scheme is setting the so-called Negro slaves against themselves and uh, creating I don't want to say cliques, but creating basically discord among these slaves, among the so-called slaves, because these weren't slaves. These were people who were forced into slavery. Let's continue. Editor repeats. The speech was delivered by a white slave owner, Willie Lynch, on the bank of the James River in 1712. So let's continue here. Again, this is a hard pill for me, so I'm gonna.
Let's Make a Slave by the Black Arcade Liberation Library 1970. It was in the interest and business of slaveholders to study human nature, and the slave nature in particular, with a view to practical results, and many of them attained astonishing proficiently in this direction. They had to deal not with earth, wood, and stone, but with men, and they by every regard they had known for their safety and prosperity they had need to know the material on which they were to work.
So here's a quote from Frederick Douglass here. And I mean, this is so vile and disgusting. It's just sickening um, how this was implemented against my ancestors. That's the only way I see this. Okay, this is page 20 of this same document, the PDF document. It says, conscious of the injustice and wrong, they were every hour perpetuating and knowing what they themselves would do were they victims of such wrong. They were consistently looking for the first sign of dread retribution. They watched, therefore, with skilled and practiced eyes, and learned to read what um, with great accuracy the state of mind and heart of the slave. Though his sable face, unusual sobriety, apparent obstruction, sulfurfulness, and indifference, indeed, any method out of the common way afforded ground for suspicion, and inquiry. That's Frederick Douglass, which is to this day why they don't want us gathering in places on corners because they feel like we'll be making some kind of a plan. They call it loitering or vagrancy. Page 21. It says, "Let's Make a Slave" is the study of the scientific process of man breaking and slave making. This description, it describes a relation and results of the Anglo-Saxon idea, a method of ensuring the master-slave relationship. Let's make a slave. Let's continue reading. I'm trying to keep from literally throwing up. I feel physical.
Let's make a slave. Let's make a slave. The origin and development of a social being called the Negro. Let us make a slave a slave. What do I need? First of all, we need a black nigger man, a pregnant nigger woman, and her baby nigger boy. Second, I will use the same basic principle that we use in the breaking of a horse, combined with some more sustaining factors.
So they're using the same method of dealing with our ancestors as they dealt with horses. Horses.
When we do it with horse, we break them from one form of life to another. That is, we reduce them from their natural state in nature, whereas nature provides them with the natural capacity to take of their needs and the needs of their offspring. We break that natural string of independence from them and thereby create a dependency state so that we may be able to get from them useful production for our business and pleasure. Let's make a slave. Cardinal principles for making a Negro for fear that our future generations may not understand the principles of breaking both horse and man. We laid down the art. For, if we are to sustain our basic economy, we must break and tie both of the beasts together, the nigger and the horse. We understand that short-range planning in economics results in periodic chaos, so that, to avoid turmoil in the economy, it requires us to have breadth and depth in long-range comprehensive planning, articulation, both skills and sharp perception. We lay down the following principles for long-range comprehensive economic planning.
Terrible. So they did this in the name of economics. Doesn't make it any better.
Let's make a slave one. Both horse and nigger are no good to the economy in the wild or natural state. 2. Both must be broken and tied together for orderly production. 3. For the orderly futures, special and particular attention must be paid to the female and the young offspring. 4. Both must be crossbred to produce a variety and division of labor. 5. Both must be taught to respond to a particular new language. 6. Psychological and physical instruction of containment must be created for both. Let's make a slave.
So he's even outlaying rules that would get him the desired outcome. Let's continue.
We hold the above 6 cardinal principles as truths to be self-evident, based on the following discourse concerning the economics of breaking and tying the horse and the nigger together, all inclusive of the 6 principles laid down above. Note, neither principle alone will suffice for good economics. All principles must be employed for the orderly good of the nation. Accordingly, both a wild horse and a wild or natural nigger is dangerous even if captured, for they will have a tendency to seek their customary freedom, and in doing so, might kill you in your sleep. You cannot rest. Let's make a slave. They sleep while you are awake and are awake while you are asleep. They are dangerous near the family house, and it requires too much labor to watch them away from the house. Above all, you cannot get them to work in the natural state. Hence, both the horse and the nigger must be broken, that is, break them from one form of mental life to another, keep the body and take the mind. In other words, break the will to resist. Now the breaking process is the same for both the horse and the nigger, only slightly varying in degrees. But as we said before, there is an art in long-range economic planning. You must keep your eye and thoughts on the female and the offspring of the horse and the nigger.
So what we're reading here is understanding how the so-called blacks in America and in the West Indies were indoctrinated by the thinking, by the logic of this method of control that this devil by the name of William Lynch brought in order to get um, so-called Negroes under control that was scattered in the west part of the hemisphere. So to get us under control, this is what he came up with. This is what he used on his own plantation, and undoubtedly had shared with people around him in that particular area. And I was bringing it to America. So this is a direct, not an indirect, but in a direct reflection of our community to this very day. Direct. Your affinity towards people who are not like you, this is where it comes from. Your aggression towards your own people, this is where it comes from. These were the implementations that were put in, these were the measures that were implemented to make you what you are, to make us what we are. Because I'm a part of this very community, and there's no separation.
Let's Make a Slave. A brief discourse in offspring development will shed light on the key to sound economic principles. Pay little attention to the generation of original breaking, but concentrate on future generations. Therefore, if you break the female mother, she will break the offspring in its early years of development, and, when the offspring is old enough to work, she will deliver it up to you, for her normal female protective tendencies will have been lost in the original breaking process. For example, take the case of the wild stud horse, a female horse and an already infant horse, and compare the breaking process with 2 nigger males in their natural state, a pregnant nigger woman with her infant offspring. Take the stud horse, break him for limited containment. Let's Make a Slave completely break the female horse until she becomes very gentle, whereas you or anybody can ride her in comfort. Bred the mare and the stud until you have the desired offspring. Then you can turn the stud to freedom until you need him again. Train the female horse whereby she will eat out of your hand, and she will in turn train the infant horse to eat out of your hand also. When it comes to break the uncivilized nigger, use the same process, but vary in degree and step up the pressure so as to do a complete reversal of the mind. Let's make a slave take the meanest and most restless nigger, strip him of his clothes in front of the remaining male niggers, the female, the nigger infant, tar and feather him, tie each leg to a different horse in opposite directions, set him fire and beat both horses to pull him apart in front of the remaining niggers. The next step is to take a bullwhip and beat the remaining nigger male to the point of death in front of the female and the infant. Don't kill him, but put the fear of God in him, for he can be useful for future breeding.
Okay, so what we're seeing here is a very descript process of destroying the powerful so-called black male image. That's what he's describing. Take the meanest and most restless so-called black male, strip him of his clothes. If you were brought here in as if you were picked up naked, hanging from a vine, swinging from a vine, you having clothes wouldn't be of any importance at this point. So stripping you of your clothes will put you back in your natural state. So that is a lie. When they captured us, we had clothes on. Our ancestors had clothes. We read about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They wore clothes, shoes. They were very civilized people. Don't believe the mess that they teach us that we were somehow some savage inferiors running around and acting like animals. They brought us to this point by doing this stuff here. That's why I'm bringing this out, so that you can understand what it is you're dealing with. Beating a male to a place so that they don't kill him, but they can use him for breeding. After destroying one, then they beat another to a place where they can still use him. Future breeding. What kind of mess? Let's continue.
Let's make a slave the breaking process of the African woman, then take the female.
Now, this is probably the most important portion, the most sampled of all of this particular letter, of all of this information. I'm going to read this. This is horrible. So deplorable. The breaking process of the African woman. Then take the female and run a series of tests on her. To see if she will submit to your desire willingly. Test her in every way. Begin because she is the most important factor for good economics. If she shows any sign of resistance in submitting completely to your will, do not hesitate to use the bullwhip on her to extract the last bit of bitch out of her. Take care not to kill her, for in doing so, you spoil good economics. When in complete submission, she will train her offspring in the early years to submit to labor when they become of age. Understanding is the best thing. Therefore, we shall go deeper into the area of the subject matter concerning what we have produced here in this breaking process of the female nigger. We have reserved relationships. In her natural uncivilized state, meaning not doing what they want, she will have a strong dependency on the uncivilized, again, not doing what they want, on the uncivilized nigger male. And she will have to have a limited protective tendency towards her independent male offspring and would raise the female offspring to be dependent like her. Nature has provided time with this balance. So basically, what this devil is saying here is that the way they are, we don't want them to be. Women are naturally dependent on the man. That's of any culture, of any race, of any nation. Women are naturally dependent on the men. What they're doing here, what he's proposing here, is that they take that away from uh, from them, and they make the so-called black female undependent on the black male, and they replace that with themselves. And that's what we see today in our society at this point. Let's continue here. We reverse nature by burning and pulling one civilized nigger apart and bullwhipping the other to the point of death, all in her presence. So, what are they doing? They're showing this woman that this man who you depend on for your protection cannot protect you because I am over him. That's what they're showing here. And this other man that you're looking at for your protection, this still your man. He can't protect you because I have ability, I have authority over him. That's what they're implanting in this woman, in her psyche. So in her psyche, she realizes that this man that she has depended on for her protection has no protection for her. This is what's implanted in our people's minds. This is the control that is over our people. This is why our marriages to this day do not work. And yes, they did work at a point. But what happened? They came back with more of this same crap. And they said, we will give you what you need. You got to get rid of him, and your family has to be broken. And with this already implanted in us, our women chose the government help. Get rid of the man. You can't protect me anyway. Police coming here, what you gonna do? Let's continue. We're on page 33 of this document. It says, by her being left alone, unprotected, with the male image destroyed, the ordeal causes her to move from her psychological dependent state, dependent on her man, to a frozen independent state. To a now she got to be concerned about herself because she's her only protection, and her only protection is to go with society. This is the same logic that was used against our people in Egypt. I'm gonna show you. I'm gonna show you. I'm going to show you here. Let's go to the King James. Uh, maybe chapter 1. No, no, it's chapter 2. No, no, it's chapter 1. Let's go back. Sorry, this thing has me completely. My blood pressure right now is unreal. All right, let's pick this up. This is Egypt. This is Exodus chapter number 1, and let's start with verse number 6. It says, "And Joseph died, and all his brethren, and all that generation." So we're talking about the generation of our patriarchs. They have all passed on. He was next to the youngest. Benjamin was the youngest of all of the patriarchs. So we're at a place where they all have passed on, and now all of after them are left. Verse 7. "And the children of Israel were fruitful and increased abundantly, and multiplied and waxed exceeding mighty, and the land was filled with them. Now there arose a new king over Mizraim, which knew not Joseph." So he didn't know who Joseph was. He had never dealt with Joseph, because this is generations in the future. "And he said unto his people, Behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we are. Come, and let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply, and it come to pass that there fall out any war, that they join also unto our enemies." Who is he concerned about? He's concerned about the males. "And fight against us, and so get them up out of the land." So he's concerned about the men joining with the enemies, with their enemies, and fighting against them. That's what he's concerned about. We have an inside people who can take us down from the inside. That is his concern. Verse 11. "Therefore they did set over them taskmasters to afflict them with their burdens. And they built for Pharaoh treasured cities, Pethro, Petham, and Ramses. But the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew. And they were grieved because of the children of Israel." So even though they put them under hard bondage and made them work with rigor, they did not stop growing. Instead, they grew even more. So they went home to their wives, and they played with their wives, and they had babies, and they continued to increase. Verse 13. "And the Egyptians made the children of Israel to serve with rigor." That means that they worked them hard. Verse 14. "And they made their lives bitter with hard bondage in mortar and in brick, and in all manner of service in the field, and all of their service wherein they made them serve was with rigor, meaning it was hard. It was not a 9 to 5 job that paid a wage. It was hard bondage work. Verse 15, and the king of Mizraim spake unto the Hebrew midwives, of which the name of one was Shipra, and the name of the other was Puha. And he said, when you do the office of a midwife unto the Hebrew women, and see them upon the stool, for if it be a son, then you shall kill him. But if it be a daughter, she shall live. Then she shall live. So right here, the Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, is telling the women who deliver the Hebrew children that any male that is born to kill him, but the females, let them live because they can be absorbed into them. Verse 18, it says, and the king of Mizraim called the midwives. Oh, Salika. Verse 17, it says, but the midwives feared the Most High, and they did not as the king of Mizraim commanded them, but saved the men children alive. And the king of Mizraim called the midwives and said unto them, why have you not done this thing? Why have you done this thing and saved the men children alive? Why haven't you did what I told you and killed these boys as they are born? Verse 19, and the midwives said unto Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not as the Egyptian women, for they are lively and deliver before the midwives come in unto them. So they're basically saying that these women are dropping babies out of them like it's not a thing. These babies coming out before the midwives can even get there. Therefore, the Most High dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and waxed very mighty. But that wasn't the case. They were just covering their own selves to keep the king from punishing them. And it came to pass, because the midwives feared the Most High, that they made them houses. And Pharaoh charged his people, saying, every son that is born you shall cast into the river. Every daughter you shall save alive. So they had the same exact mentality at the time of in Egypt when the children of Israel were there. And this is what was implemented. Get rid of the males and keep the females. That's what we're seeing here. But on a different level, because they wanted the males for the hard bondage. They wanted the females here for the sake of having them. So if you keep the females and get rid of the males, what's going to happen to the next generation? It's only going to be females. So what happens when there's only females? This other population of people mate with these women, and then you have these children going forward. So if you get rid of the males, now you only have the females, and now you have they've taken over. That's exactly what this is saying, but at a different level, because the level that they're using here is to control the mind of the female and the male. So let's continue here. Because she has become psychologically independent, she will train her female offspring to be psychologically independent. What have you got? So basically what he's saying here is that you take the male and destroy him in front of the female. So her dependency on the male It's gone. So now her only dependency is on the female. That's the same thing Pharaoh was saying. Get rid of the males, and the Hebrew Israelite women will only depend on the Egyptians because that will be all of their help. They won't have any help because the males are gone. So you'll take these Hebrew Israelite women and they will become a part of the Egyptian culture or the Mizraite culture. So they were implementing the same plan, the Mizraites, on a level of destruction, complete annihilation of the male, and the Willie Lynch letter, and the idea of the mental destruction of the Hebrew Israelite male and the mental destruction of the Hebrew Israelite female, so that you can get the labor from the male, because his mother will teach him to work hard and give all he can to save his life. Let's continue. You've got the nigger woman out front and the man behind and scared. This is a perfect situation for sound sleep in economics. Before the breaking process, we had to alertly be on guards at all time. So they were afraid that their demise was going to come at the hands of these Negroes. But until they got these Negroes, so-called Negroes, at the mindset that they wanted them in, they could not sleep soundly before that process, because they knew that retribution was owed to them. And to this day, they still fear retribution, because there are pockets of so-called Negroes, and not just Negroes, because they've done wrong by so many different people, that the retribution that they have coming is inevitable. It's unavoidable. Let's continue. Now we can sleep soundly, for out of frozen fear, this woman standeth guard for us. This woman stands guard for us. He cannot get past her infant slave process. He is a good tool, not ready to be tied to the horse at the tender age. At a tender age. By the time the nigger boy reaches the age of 16, he is soundly broken and ready for life's sound, of efficient work and the reproduction of the unit of good labor force. So basically, what he's saying is that his mother is going to teach him to be, to basically make him good economics for the slave master. He will work diligently by her instruction, and their concern about being overthrown is null and void, because it's not going to operate in that manner, because his ideal, his mother is not going to let him operate as that. So again, it's the same principle that happened in Egypt, in Mizraim. The difference is, in Mizraim, the Pharaoh, the king, wanted to get rid of all the males and keep only the females. In this situation, he wanted the female to feel no dependency on the male, and so she would make her son to be completely non a non-leader, basically. That he couldn't, because he wouldn't even try to defend anything. He would just go along with whatever the slave master said. And that's what we deal with in relationships to this day. That's why it's so hard for a man to find a woman. And that's why a lot of men, so-called black men, are crossing lines and going into other people and taking wives. I can remember Eddie Murphy and Raw talking about going over one of his boys' house and uh, mentioning how nice the setup was. And he asked the woman, did she decorate? And he had a Japanese woman, and she looked at her man, and he said, you may speak. And she said, yes, I decorated myself. He was like, wow, that is amazing. Japanese women are some of the most docile, submissive women in the world. So does that mean that I'm gonna train my sons? I got 3 boys. I'm gonna train my sons to go to Japan and get a woman because they submissive and docile? Absolutely not. That's not the way to go. That's the easy way out. What that means is that you got to take more time and deal with your own women in the manner that they need to be dealt with, and assure them that their protection is granted. Now that is what exists here. You go, uh, that don't exist in Congo. That don't exist in Ghana. That don't exist in Nigeria or in Kenya. In places where we have people in abundance, where the Israelite people are great in number and called by other names. This is a hard read. This is a hard conversation, and it's hard to deal with. It's hard to feel. It's hard. It's terrible. Now, when I read this in the script, it's more of a historic read. Yes, it happened, but this was so long ago. This was so many generations that. But this Willie Lynch thing, this was my great. This was 3, 4 generations. This was 4 or 5 generations ago. I mean, this was no time ago. My mother's mother, my grandmother, and her mother before her, and her mother before her, was witnessing this. They were tying men to horses and pulling them apart. We're talking 5, maybe 6 generations ago. 1730, maybe 7 generations, maybe. Consider that generation is about, I mean, you can stretch it to say 30 years or, yeah, roughly 30 years, not even less than 30 years. Your ideal time to have children is any time between 21 and 34, 21 to 34. So we're talking, that's a generation. So if you're a mother, if you're a woman, and you're 25 years old, you're ready to generate. That's what generation means. You're ready to generate an offspring. So I really want to stop this right here, but I know we need this. I'm going to stop it right here because this is hard to stomach. I mean, reading this and understanding it and trying to break it down is terrible. I put the article in the description, the link to it. Continue to read it, finish reading it. It is literally disgusting. and it's horrible. It's very much horrible and deplorable. I'll also put the link for the scripture that I read. I'll put that in the description box. Bible Gateway as well. So this is what we experience. This is where you come from. This is where I come from. This is who we are, and this is how we have gotten to the place that we are. Now, I have an ex-wife in the earth. I have 4 children, and this woman chose to split from me because there's no value in the so-called black man, because they're taught that they don't need you. Yeah, I got a tattoo of a wedding band on my hand because I was so serious about marriage before I even had any knowledge of the truth. So I went and got a tattoo of a wedding band on my hand for that purpose. And yet, even with that, my now ex-wife cared so little about being a single mother that she was willing to end our relationship of 15, 17 years because she didn't want to deal with the truth of this word, number one. And she didn't want to deal with documents like the Willie Lynch letter. She'd rather be free to do whatever she wanted to do. So she had a chance to be free and independent, or to be under the ruler, the leadership, the rulership of a man who would learn the way of the Most High. And she chose to be free and independent. So she's suffering with it now. You know, it's her choice, but she's dealing with it now. And I'm sure being raised by a single mother, I promise you, it's not fun. It's not fun for the children. It's not fun for the woman. And she's experiencing it, the lack of fun. And on top of trying to date in the current dating market in this society, with men who have given up on women. And by the way, you have 4 children. Yeah, you was married, but why are you divorced? I know what they say. They're gonna say, "Oh, he was abusive. He was crazy. He joined the cult. He did all of this. He did that. Whatever." But this is the cause of it. This is what's been ingrained in our people, and I understand that. So I'm not angry. I mean, it just is what it is. But what do you do in this situation? So this is the Akazaki Yahoo. I'm gonna stop it here, and we're gonna continue bringing more content. I hope you'll read this Willie Lynch letter and help get a better understanding. Like, comment, and share this video if you will, and keep in mind that this discussion needs to continue. And I do want to submit to Kevin Samuel that this is still a problem today. So I don't know if he understands this, but the thinking in our women exists for a reason. One thing he pointed out was that the women, the value of the black man is not in the black women, but other women are value in the black man. Because now we're at a place where you're able to go and get education and make money and take yourself to a economical level that other women find appealing. And so other women are looking at so-called black men with great desire, where the so-called black woman is not desiring the so-called black man. Well, she's desiring him, but she's only desiring a very small portion of these particular men. They want men to make all this money and to provide this elitist lifestyle for them when they in turn have nothing to offer in that aspect, in the same aspect. So keep these things in mind. It is the slave woman mindset because they want the plantation owner, they want the servitude of the slaves, and they want to be able to operate and just produce offspring, and that be all of their thinking, all of their contribution. Just because I exist and I can have children, that's all you need from me. So we got to change this mindset. You know, you have men now. A lot of them are still weak. You have some of us who say, "Try me if you will, and I will crush you." No fear of incarceration or um, even death. So, all these things being said, I give all praise, honor, and great esteem to the Most High Power, Yahuwah, Bahashem, Yahushua Hamashiach, and to the 12 tribes of Israel who are scattered to the four quarters of the earth. I say, Shalom Wabarukim, that is peace and blessings. And I cannot wait till the day that the Most High brings us together once again. And we are 12 tribes, one family, one nation, under the Most High once again. Shalom Wabarukim, peace and blessings.